And welcome to the Bilingual Authorization Program Standard Transition Planning Technical Assistance webinar. We are joined today by myself, Iorio Samwani. I'm a consultant here in PSD. And my colleague, Miranda, you want to quickly say hello?
Hi, Miranda Gutierrez, consultant here at the Commission. Thanks for joining us today.
And we also have support from CAPTE this morning. And Dr. Merritt and Dr. Munoz, please introduce yourselves.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for being here today. I mean, I take it by definition that there is a lot of bilingual energy in the room today. My name is Eduardo Munoz. I'm an assistant professor at San Jose State University, but I'm also currently the president CAPTE, the California Association for Bilingual Teacher Education. It is a pleasure for us to work together with the CTC in co-hosting this event. Some of our members we're also part, as I was myself, of the committee that developed the new standards and BTPEs, and it is our commitment for CAPTE and for ourselves to support the field in making this new reality happen. So we are enormously honored to be here with us. And Sharon.
Hi, I'm Sharon Merritt, and I'm now past president of CAPTE, and I'm very excited to be here today and to see the mucha energía that is entering the room, and looking forward to representing CAPTE here and talking with all of you about upcoming events and how this is going to roll out.
Thank you. So before we transition to our plans for today, I would quickly go over today's agenda. So we're going to quickly provide some background information based on what's been happening on the bilingual authorization program standard over the past years and months. And we will touch on providing the timeline to date, as well as giving some updates on the standard and what's changed since the previous standard. Our lovely representative here today will talk about the field experience, as well as the transition plans and expectations. And then once we get to the end of today's meeting, time allowing, we will discuss next steps, as well as answer any questions that you might have. So just for quick meeting norms, please everyone put your microphone on mute. This is a recorded session, and the recordings will be available at the end of this meeting. Should you have any questions, feel free to use the raise hand feature or add your questions to the chat, and I will be monitoring the chat during this process. Please just ensure you are fully attentive to our meeting and presentation today. And by the end of our meeting, we will be sharing the recording with everyone today.
Well, we begin by looking at why we are here. How did we get to this point that we have new bilingual authorization standards, a new and actually brand new first ever bilingual teacher performance expectation? So the idea of revisiting this was needed by the field. The previous standards were already dated, and they date from before all the many transformations that have happened in California multilingual education policy, so it was an urgent call for us to actually start looking into the practices that we were doing. Every number of years, these all standards frameworks get revisited, and ours were highly overdue. The authorization standards, the way that we have conceived them, we're trying to adapt to new ways in which we want to make bilingual education and teacher preparation more robust, more rigorous. It is a time where new programs are luckily growing across the state to be in line with California 2030 policy. Remember, one of the goals of that statement was to actually grow bilingual programs by growing by the pool of bilingual teachers, by growing the number of teacher preparation programs in the state. So we had to be in connection with the times. And the BTPEs, before we didn't have BTPEs, we have TPEs, and we only had standards. So in terms of developing that parallelism, that connection with the TPEs, we developed these BTPEs, which would make kind of like the policy and the expectations much more clear across the board. It would make it everything more symmetrical, and the BTPEs, as you already probably know, because you've looked at them, are building on the TPEs, but adding that necessary bilingual component. One of the critical reasons why we needed to advance the field was introduction of new visions of language and new visions of culture. That was one of the important conversations that we were having in the committee, for example, and everybody is aware of, for example, translanguaging and the conversations that we have in the field about what that means with regards to taking an assets-based orientation towards the skills of our teacher candidates. Or we were also considering, I mean, what is culture? What is culture as opposed to not something that's captured in a book, but something that is more in dialogue, transforming itself. The culture of world languages as they unfold and become part of the heritage of the US, and they become like a US fact that's happening. So we definitely wanted to advocate for new visions of multilingualism that were, of course, taking us away from 2 to 7, from English centrism, and providing a necessary counterbalance to that inertia that we still know that things are not fully resolved in our state. At the same time, when creating this document, we were facing a tension and a problem of practice. How do we raise the bar? How do we make this, as I said, more rigorous, more robust, while at the same time we are addressing what has been termed as the bilingual teacher shortage, and what we have possibly with, if you are in a program preparation, probably you are familiar with districts sending emails like, where are the teachers? Do you have a teacher? I need a teacher. So how do we do both, and how do we hit a sweet spot where we can improve the field while at the same time not choking the pipeline, which is already is already suffering, and we certainly want to grow. This transformation was what I've termed a necessary participatory process. It was a 2-year commitment by practitioners from California, people there were teachers, there were administrators, there were coaches, there were people from institutions of higher education. One of the critical aspects of that process is that we wanted to have a kaleidoscopic perspective on how this was going to happen. And in fact, as you are going to hear, we had conversations. We tried to navigate some of that tension or problems of the tension and the problems of practice. So eventually we felt really really satisfied. We consider those who want to advance multilingual education in the state, we consider the bilingual authorization standards in the BTPE quite a success in terms of advancing visions and presenting a more promising future for multilingual in California. And hopefully, as is always the case, we are hoping that these policies can also influence other policies looking forward, and we can have a more multilingual California altogether. It's not just, we want to certainly not inhabit a bilingual corner. We want multilingualism to be a matter that matters to all. That's the perspective on the background, the rationale why this was needed, the step that the CTC took in convening this great group of individuals, which was it was a real pleasure to work with them all, and that's here where we are now. Today's webinar is addressing what we're all having to face, which is, okay, now how do we make it happen? So, but I wanted to make sure that in my background or preface to this, we have an optimistic note because this is advancing multilingual education in California. So looking forward to learn from you all.
Thank you so much for that background summary. Moving on to our next slide. So these are the transition timeline on the work to update the bilingual authorization program. So over 2020, when a lot of us had to go work from home, the bilingual team at the commission put together the panel to update this work on the bilingual program standards and BTPEs. And this work went on from May 2020 all through November 2021. As of December, the item and our proposed update was adopted by the commission. So that was a success on our part, and based on all the work that's been done until that moment. As of June 2022, we did put out instructions for the transition plans. And recently in October, we had the regulations item for this newly updated standard presented and put in the consent calendar for the commissions. So from October 2022 until next year, June 23, we will be providing technical assistance as well as guided programs as they transition to the new program. And just so I note on here, institutions in the blue cohort do not need to respond to the transition plan if they already turned in the program review in October and had responded to the 2021 standards. Other than that, we will be here to provide support for all programs, and the due date for the transition plans will be January 31st, 2023. And that is right around the corner. From February 2023 all through April 2023, the plan is to review the transition plans that's been turned in. And by July 1st of 2023, no new candidate or all new candidate enrolled will have to be under the new standards. And 2023-24 academic school year, all programs need to be aligned to the 2021 updated standards. On this slide, this is a linked PSA. If encourage everyone to check it out. If you do click on this link, it will take you to the extended information that has that we provided on the updated standard BTPs, as well as the timeline for transition plans.
Great. So as noted, the bilingual authorization program standards were last updated in 2008. And so the way the standards were organized, they included the program standard, which was everything that the program's responsible for doing and providing candidates, but also mixed in there were the candidate competencies. So if we fast forward back to about 2017, 2018, the commission was approached by some of you and others in the field who advocated for updating the standards. So with all the policy changes around bilingual education, we made it here with updated standards and BTPEs. So again, the 2021 standards include the program standards and performance expectations, which were part of the old standards, but they're now redesigned and structured differently. So here we have the 2021 program standards. As you remember, the 2008 standards were comprised of 6 standards. And again, they had the competencies built in throughout the standards. And so here what we've done is with the preliminary preparation programs, this sort of follows the same flow as those standards. And all the program standards, again, are what the program is responsible for providing candidates. And then standard 2 is where things are a little bit different and have changed, as well as standard 3. Standard 2 is about the performance expectations. And these are building upon the universal performance expectations. And then looking at program standard 3, field experience was largely absent from the 2008 standards. So the panel worked to include that in these updated standards. So expanding a little bit on the BTPEs, again, it's part of program standard 2. So these 6 domains of the BTPEs, they are actually the same domains that are part of the universal teaching performance expectations, as well as the California standards for the teaching profession. So these are the candidate competencies. And so these are what all of your candidates will be assessed on. And as we talk through the transition plan and spend some more time talking about the components, I think you might find that aligning your program to the BTPEs is where you might spend the most time as you work and plan your transition. So again, also new in this in these standards is the field experience. And so there was some conversation about what this might look like, why it was included, how it's going to be done, and what kind of options there are for candidates. So at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Eduardo, who can talk about a little bit about the panel's rationale for including this and some of those flexible options for you all.
Yes, indeed. Well, so when it comes to the field experience, one of the big changes, comparing past and present, is the fact that before there was 0 hours of field experience, and now we introduced 20 hours, which of course we know it is one of those components connecting with the background that I presented earlier, is one of those areas where we are pushing the envelope, and it does require work from us, and it does pose challenges, productive ones, and also forcing us to think about ways to do it. When we talk about the clinical experience, about this field experience that we are requiring, or that is being required, is mostly because we assume that the new competencies that are happening in the BTPEs are not something that simply transfers from having a regular teaching experience, although regular teaching experience goes a long way, but there are like aspects that we want to see in practice. And I say we, when we are concerned and committed to expanding multilingual education in California, we're also thinking, well, we want to do that with a level of quality in performance and capacity to provide really instruction that's supporting our students. That's something that we need to we want to see ourselves in order to certify it. This level of we conceive the 20 hours as an element of professionalization, in the sense that it recognizes that there are skills that simply don't fall out of the sky. It's recognizing that that bilingual teaching requires a skill set, requires dispositions, requires knowledge that is simply not theoretically learned. We also think that this field experience is something that would need to be observable and in a way that it provides evidence for the universities or the programs that are recommending for the authorization to be able to say, okay, this is ready to move forward. How we came up with 20 hours. It was the why not 19, why not 21? One might say. We landed at those hours thinking something that a requirement of hours that was not going to be too stringent on the field, while at the same time providing for enough time to make those practices, skills, and knowledge observable. There were some experiences with programs that were dealing with programs such as with Asian languages, for example, that were constrained by the fact that not everywhere is possible to find those placements, and that also there's logistics with that. So building on the experiences of some programs in California that require that minimum of 20 hours, that's how we reached that kind of consensus. Ideally, we would even like to see more. Of course, if all conditions were possible, if we would find ourselves in a right spot with regards to developing multilingual California, perhaps in the future we may get to a better place. For example, I can also speak to 20 hours from the perspective of what we do at San Jose State, which is something that we are going to be talking about, how we are navigating this space. We started requiring 20 hours of experience, actually more than 20 hours. We started requiring 2 weeks of field experience for secondary candidates. As we know, particularly at least in the area where we are, dual immersion program or bilingual programs in secondary are not that frequent. So we made an arrangement to find 2 weeks of a bilingual placement for our secondary candidates. And this has been going on for the past year and a half. That required collaboration with districts, required finding those trusted partners in our areas that share a vision, and also the understanding, sharing the burden in terms of we are trying to make a more multilingual California with quality teaching. So these 20 hours, the critical aspect is that, of course, in order not to pose unreasonable burdens on programs that may be starting to explore this, there's a menu, a list of potential activities that could be done for the 20 hours, although the understanding is that at least half of those 20 hours would be concerning activities that imply direct contact with students, instructional practice. However, we thought we wanted to think outside of the box, and those 20 hours also include other activities that are related to teaching, that have to do with bilingual skills. But again, that may the idea that only 10 hours will be a direct instruction with students is also hoping that this is not posing an insurmountable disruptive load on districts, on universities, etc. So that's, in a nutshell, the field experience. Why we thought, the committee thought that was necessary. Why we think that it poses it's a positive challenge for us, but at the same time, how we can actually approach it. And there's examples in California already of trying to do these in areas of bilingual education that are like difficult to staff and difficult to find placements for. So that's back to you, Miranda.
Thank you. And again, just to emphasize, the intent is to make these flexible because we know, what works at San Jose State for Eduardo might work different for someone down in San Diego. So again, the examples provided in that agenda item Appendix F, that's an actual link. The panel put together a list of suggestions, and keep in mind, that list is not exhaustive. So it's just a way to get you thinking about what might work for you. Again, flexible, but you want to make sure that the experiences for your candidates are planned and purposeful. You want to know where your candidates are, where they're doing field experience, and why they're doing that. So keep that in mind as you're thinking about these 20 hours. So we're going to spend some time now talking more specifically about the components of the transition plan. We'll spend some time talking about each piece that you're going to need to submit. So just keep in mind, one of the purposes of the transition plan is to provide evidence that programs are transitioning, and it assists you in the redesign of your coursework and assessments that align to the BTPEs, as well as integrating that fieldwork component. So if you've had a chance to review the transition plan, you'll notice that it downloads as a Word document. And then within that document, there are instructions and specific components that we are asking you to provide. So one of the components that is necessary, is one of the first things we ask for, is identifying who's involved in the planning process and the key benchmarks. So if you've ever submitted a program review, you might think of this as sort of a scaled down version of that, or a mini program review. But what we've tried to do here with the transition plan is making sure that the documentation that we're asking for has a purpose and is informative for programs as they transition. So I mentioned that first component that we are going to request is a table of the individuals involved. So here's just a screenshot from the transition plan. You can see we want to know the name of the individuals involved and their title and role. And so keep in mind, this can be both your internal and external partners, especially if you're thinking about fieldwork. You might want to include some of your district partners in some of these conversations. So that other component I mentioned are the benchmarks. So you can see what we've started here is a list of what some of those benchmarks might look like. So again, keep in mind, this list is not exhaustive. It might not include everything that you need to do in your program. So please feel free to modify this, add things, change things. We just want to see that you're thinking about these things, you're planning, and you have dates and timelines in mind as you work through this. So another component that we've asked for, excuse me, are pathways for program completion. So we know that some programs offer it to their concurrent multiple single ed specialist candidates. Some offer it to their pre-service and in-service teachers. Some of you have one language you offer, some have multiple languages. Some of you offer it for your intern candidates or only your traditional student teaching or residency candidates. So what you can do here is provide a table of all the pathways and options for your candidates. So you want to be sure whether you offer it to in-service teachers, pre-service teachers, the languages, and again, the pathway, whether it's a traditional or an intern model. Offer it to in-service teachers, then indicate that you don't offer it to in-service. And I think a simplified way you could provide all of this is in a table. So the next component is a course sequence. So right here, we want to know which courses our candidate's going to take to complete the authorization. So you can provide a draft course sequence that has been or that you plan to submit for institutional review, and that's going to be included in your university's catalog. You'll want to provide a sequence for each pathway. So if you have a pathway for your in-service concurrent candidates, they may take one set of courses, and then if you offer it to in-service teachers, they might take different courses. So if you offer different courses for the different pathways, be sure that you include the sequence for each. Okay, going back to the fieldwork component again. So what we've asked for here is really just a narrative description. And we're asking you to provide up to 1 page just describing how you're planning to implement the fieldwork for your in-service teachers and pre-service teachers. And again, if you don't offer the authorization to in-service teachers, just note that in your narrative somewhere so that reviewers know that you're only offering it to pre-service teachers, so they know what type of fieldwork you need to be thinking about. Again, flexible opportunities for candidates. So as you think about how you're going to include this fieldwork, just keep in mind that flexibility piece. So now we're going to talk about the course matrix, and this is probably going to be where you might spend the bulk of your time thinking about designing your courses and how you're going to implement some of these BTPEs. So the course matrix does include all of the BTPEs. And if you've seen a course matrix before, what we do is ask you to identify where each of the performance expectations are going to be introduced, practiced, and assessed. Now, for the purposes of this transition plan, we know that programs are still in the stages of thinking and designing these programs and how they're going to integrate the BTPEs within their courses. So right now, what we're asking you to do is to identify where everything will be, where all the BTPEs will be introduced, practiced, and assessed. But we're only asking you to specifically show us how or where the BTPE is going to be identified. And I have an example. We have an example in the upcoming slides to show you. So when the BTP is introduced, is it going to be introduced through a lecture, a reading, an assessment? And you're going to have to provide a direct hyperlink to that. You'll also need to identify where BTPEs are practiced and assessed. However, right now for the transition plan, we do not need to see the assignment or the assessment where it's practiced and assessed. And then it's fine to introduce, practice, and assess a BTPE in the same course. They don't need to be spread across courses. We just need to see that you're actually introducing, practicing, and assessing. So this is an example of the course matrix. The highlighted pieces in the course matrix are where the competencies are going to be introduced. So again, any instance where the BTP is introduced, you need to provide a hyperlink, and it has to link to the course syllabus where that component, or excuse me, where that BTPE is introduced. If you've already fleshed out where they're practice and assess, and you have those assignments or assessments, you are welcome to link to those. But the expectation for the purposes of the transition plan is that you're only showing us the assignment where they're introduced, or the lecture, the time in the course where they're introduced. So thinking about the hyperlinks, I think we can go to the next slide. So thinking about the hyperlinks and some tips, the course matrices, again, I think are where you'll spend the bulk of your time. It's important that you link the syllabi outside of the course matrix. The course matrix right now is provided to you as a Word document, and it's maybe 6, 7, 8 pages. I'm not sure off the top of my head. But what you don't want to do is add syllabi to that document and make it a 100-page document. It's not efficient for reviewers to use it in such a manner that way. So what you want to do is hyperlink your syllabi so that they open in the internet in either a new tab or a new browser. Thinking about functionality for your reviewers and for yourself as you're going back and making changes and modifying your matrices and your syllabi. You want to make sure that it's easy to navigate between the matrix and the linked syllabi. And I think it's important to work with your colleagues across programs at institutions, because the multiple single subject programs had a transition a few years back. The Ed Specialist programs just recently transitioned, as well as the Pupil Personnel Services. So even though you're not working with the same program, it's the same type of components that you're submitting. So we do encourage you to work with your colleagues across programs at the institution for maybe some support and technical guidance. So the organization of the transition plan, excuse me, there's no right way that we're telling you to prepare it, but what you do need to do is make sure that you include all of the components that are required of the transition plan. And additionally, we don't accept documents and heavy attachments anymore. Everything needs to be posted to your accreditation website. And so, but at this point, all institutions should have an accreditation website started. And so you should work with, again, with programs across your institution to see how they provided other accreditation documents on their website, because what we don't want is for you to send us a link to a Google Drive that has a bunch of folders and leaving us to decipher where the documents are and put things together that way. And if you need examples of websites, you can definitely contact us, but we do encourage you to work with the programs across your institution, because it's likely that they've already started their accreditation website and that there's something established where you can add this transition plan. So again, submitting the transition plan, I'm going to emphasize again, posted on your institution's accreditations website. So what that means is that you'll need to send us the URL to the email address listed on the screen there. And you want to make sure you do that by January 1st, 2023. The last page of the transition plan, the document that downloads as a Word document, there's a signatory page for your unit head or dean. So you want to make sure that they sign off on that. You need to provide that with a transition plan. That is the one thing. You can email us the signature page, or you can post it on your accreditation website. We'll leave that up to you, but just know that we do want that signed page from your unit head. So looking at the transition review, the tentative plan is to review them between February and April. And ideally, we will use our Board of Institutional Reviewers to come together for a day, review transition plans, and provide feedback to institution. And what that'll look like is, if you participated in a program review, The programs are reviewed by a BIR team and feedback is sent back, but you're not required to submit documentation and go back and forth until all standards are aligned. Ideally, we'll just be providing feedback to institutions, and then you can make the changes based on that feedback received. Now, given the fact that it's not a huge program review like program review in year 5 of the accreditation cycle, we may be asking the reviewers to review maybe 2 programs and provide feedback, just so that people are getting more comfortable with the standards and seeing what other institutions are doing as well. So the panel put together some program planning questions. I'll go ahead and let Eduardo talk to you a little bit more about those.
Just a second, as I'm accessing the document right now. Well, so the program, as you know, the what I'm gonna give you is an overview of what is this program planning questions are meant to be. As probably you may have or may have not participated in the development of program or going through accreditation, etc. These program planning questions are a resource for programs to make a connection, almost like a transition between those standards and actually what's happening in your program. They are meant to be as a conversation prompter as well for reflection when it comes to the people that are participating in your program. And these programs planning questions are not being used by the review teams per se, but certainly the questions themselves are going to be aligned to the contents of the standards and the BTPEs. So this is not like a program planning question that one is going to be expected to engage in a conversation with a reviewer when that happens, but something that should prompt and inspire those internal conversations. The program planning questions are arranged in a document according to the standards, and they cover program design, preparing candidates toward mastery of the bilingual teaching performance expectations, field experience, monitoring, supporting and assessing candidate progress towards meeting program requirements, and also assessment of candidate competence. These questions are, from my experience, proved tremendously valuable when it comes to identifying potential blind spots or areas for growth, and at the same time ensuring that everybody that's participating in the Bilingual Authorization Program is on the same page with regards to what the program stands for, what are the components, principles. So it's a tremendous resource as well. We may call it for professional development among those that participate in the program.
Eduardo, were you sharing a document?
Yes. Well, I'm going to. I think it's. Can it be linked to the? I'm taking it from the document of the CTC. It's in the slides as well.
Okay.
But I'm going to paste it right now. Okay, I think that you already beat me to it. Thank you. And then that also leads to a preview of a document that's in preparation as well. And I'm going to let Sharon speak about it, but this is in connection to the PPQs. This tool that is soon to see the light is meant to prepare to promote those professional conversations. You're muted, Sharon.
Thank you. COPTE was invited to help with the process of developing a crosswalk between the old and new standards. And with help from Miranda and Iore, we've put together the beginning of a document that will be eventually disseminated to everyone to help you in navigating how the old standards, which may be what shows up in your current syllabi for your current program courses and in your previous IPR or previous assessment for accreditation, how those connect to the new standards and to the BTPEs. And so this is a document in development currently, where it's at the moment, it is a strictly administrative document that is simply about bringing the two sets of standards alongside each other with very little commentary or evaluation. In some cases, as we've developed it, I've included some of the new or expanded language related to a particular standard that crosses over from the 2008 standards into the 2021 standards and BTPEs, but there's no evaluative comments and no suggestions made. It's strictly an administrative tool currently to help you be able to align the two, see how they interact with each other. It's been an interesting process for me personally, looking at these through doing a crosswalk, because it's given me some insights into the ways in which the old standards are very differently represented in the new standards and BTPEs, and how much has changed. And the implications of all of those changes are something that we are all going to have to be thinking about in this process of program transition. But this is a beginning point, I would imagine, for most of us in thinking about meeting the demands of the transition plan, is where do these standards show up in our current syllabi and program plans, and therefore where might these new standards and BTPEs show up in our revised transition plan and in our revised syllabi. So I'm very hopeful that we're going to have this ready within the next week or so to disseminate, and that will be coming from Miranda and Yore to all of you to use as a tool. So I think I don't have anything else to say about that now, Miranda. Thanks.
Thanks, Sharon. So moving forward and for next steps, and just for the record, we do see your questions in the chat and we will be addressing them very shortly. So for next steps, we do plan to host additional technical assistance or office hour, just depending on the kind of support you might need after this meeting. So feel free to reach out to Miranda and I via the bilingual email, and we will be ready to provide your support. Again, we also prepared the bilingual authorization webpage on the Commission's website that has additional resources and information for programs transitioning to the new standards. The presentation we had for today, the slideshow, will also be added to that page. So by the end of this week, hopefully we will add this information as well to the PSDE news, just so everyone has access to these. And like Sharon had mentioned, the crosswalk, more information to come on that hopefully shortly, and we will share that with everyone as well. Again, we did put out a survey before this meeting, and just for the record, if you had, put in a questions, we noticed some questions were a bit personalized. So Miranda and I will be reaching out, separately to those programs that had very specific questions, not really applicable to everyone. So that's that for now. And so we're going to use the rest of our time here I'm going to read through the chat and hopefully we can address some of these questions. Miranda, are you ready?
Yes, thanks.
Perfect. So the first question we had was, if a candidate were pursuing an MSS's credential at the same time as they're working on their bilingual credential, can the 20 hours for the bilingual be part of the 600 hours for the MSS's program?
Yes, absolutely. And it's not for concurrent candidates, you can include the 20 within those 600. So it's not 620, but it's included within.
Perfect. So next question, if a candidate has a clear multiple subject credential and wants to pursue a bilingual authorization, are the 20 hours required in addition to the exams and all coursework?
So for candidates who complete the authorization 100% through the exam route, no, the 20 hours are not required, but if they complete a combination of exam and program coursework, yes, fieldwork is required, but remember, keep in mind that for in-service teachers, prior bilingual teaching experience can be considered, and so that'll have to be discussed with the program though.
So do we need to submit the entire program sequence for each path?
Yeah, so for each pathway that you offer the authorization, yes, submit the sequence of courses for each pathway. If they're different, if they're the same, then indicate that it's the same for all pathways. But if courses are different for different candidates, then yes, include all.
So I think this other question came in when you were sharing the course matrix. So the question is, does this include prerequisite courses?
So if the prerequisite courses cover any of the BTPEs, then yes, you do need to include them.
Another question, so just to clarify, we don't need to link separate assignments for each assignment that is considered the I, just the portion in the syllabi where the assignment is described.
Where it's described, or if you, I'm not sure I understand exactly. Can you read it one more time?
So just to clarify, we don't need to link separate assignments for each assignment that is considered the I of the IPA, just the portion in syllabi where the assignment is described.
If I'm understanding correctly, yes, if the assignment is described, that's fine to link to that. I hope that answered. I hope I understood the question.
So another question is just for additional support. So our university does not currently have a BILA program and are anxious about writing one. So what is the best way to begin this process? Do we have a template outlining this new standard and requirements?
Yeah, so I actually work with all of the new programs that come through the commission as well. So if you, I'll put the email in the chat, but if you send an email to the initial program review team, myself or my colleague will be able to give you all the information you need. And then of course, if we need to set up a time to chat, we're happy to do that. So I'll put the email in the chat.
So we are also working on a critical analysis of the newly revised BTPEs and how this could be implemented in proxy with, we think this could amplify the PPQ. So I think that's probably an added resources that we can address. Let's see what else here. Are there any additional questions? Eduardo and Sharon, any additional words based on the
I have a question, Yori.
Sure.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Great. Good morning. Thank you for this webinar. My question is for the post-credential candidates that are in service in a combination of exams, coursework plus the 20 hours. I understand that we can give prior credit for prior bilingual teaching experience, but my question is also the 20 hours, can they be a combination of 10 hours virtual, 10 hours on ground, or do they have to be all on ground?
Virtual is okay, yes.
Can we do 20 hours virtual?
Well, it goes back to a little bit what Eduardo said about making sure that there are instructional hours. So those include instructional hours for teachers. Then we've seen that virtual works fine.
So in other words, you could look at a teacher that is completing or conducting instructional delivery to students via Zoom.
Yeah, as long as they're covering the BTPEs.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Okay, Miranda, any last words before?
Yeah, so I did include both Yori and my email in the chat. And we know that this was one of our first technical assistance provided. So if you're finding you might need more support, we do want to hopefully plan something for you all next month, but we'd like to get a sense of what might be helpful, whether it's just drop in office hours so you can come chat and ask questions you have, or if we needed to do, if the folks would like to see another presentation like this, we're open and available. So just feel free to send us any input. Today's presentation is being recorded, and so once we work with our tech team on our side, we'll get it posted to the website, send out a link in the PSD News. If you're not subscribed to the PSD News, make sure that you do subscribe. We will put a link in the chat. That's where you'll receive updates on programmatic changes, not just bilingual, but everything professional services related, as well as information about office hours, more technical assistance, and those sorts of things.
Yes, we cannot currently provide a definite time as far as when the videos will be posted. Hopefully, fingers crossed, maybe end of this week if we are the ones editing the video to upload them. But again, we will post the office hours in the PSD News, so look out for that. And you can just drop in to ask whatever questions you might have.
We would also like to express appreciation to the CTC for organizing this. I'm putting Sharon's and my own email in the chat because also CAPTE remains a resource if you're thinking about how to implement in this. And this is a professional community where we can discuss matters of implementation. And we also look forward to continuing the work with the CTC in the dropping office hours and in the development of the crosswalk that Sharon is leading. Do you have any questions regarding CAPTE? You got our emails there. We are very quick to respond.
Yes, they are. Any last words, Sharon?
Just to say thank you again, to reiterate what Eduardo was saying, thank you so much for holding this event and including CAPTE as the organization that represents virtually all of the folks here that are transitioning their programs. And we stand at the ready to answer questions, serve our programs all over the state. So thank you again.
Yeah, and we just also want to add our thank you to CAPTE, especially Eduardo and Sharon for their collaboration and helping us prepare and plan this and in our next steps and supporting with the crosswalk as well. So it's a collaborative process and we thank everyone and thank you for joining today and asking questions as well.
And one more thank you to all the members that were part of the panel to get the work for today.
Yes.
Thanks to everyone.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, I think we will go ahead and wrap up. Again, feel free to contact EORA and me if you have questions. Eduardo and Sharon as well have provided their email addresses. If anything would be helpful for you to have or know, please do let us know and we'll work on seeing how we can make it available for you all. But again, subscribe to the PSD News. That's where you can count on getting information about more technical assistance or office hours. And just remember, we're here to support you through this transition.